Imagine stepping into a familiar place, a space meant for relaxation and joy, only to be met with suspicion. You belong here, yet someone challenges your presence as if you were an outsider. Would you let it slide? Or would you stand your ground? The sun hung high in the summer sky, casting golden light over the community pool. The sound of splashing water, cheerful laughter, and the occasional lifeguard whistle blended into a perfect summer symphony. Families lounged on brightly colored chairs, children ran barefoot across the hot pavement, and the scent of sunscreen filled the air. It was a scene of simple, carefree pleasure, at least for most. Michael Carter, 15 years old, stood at the pool's entrance with his towel draped over his shoulder. His mother had finally given him permission to visit on his own, and he had been looking forward to this all week. A fresh start, a new neighborhood, and a chance to make some friends. This was what summer was supposed to be about. He adjusted his goggles, already feeling the cool water on his skin in his imagination. He had no idea that within moments, his excitement would turn into something far less enjoyable. As he stepped forward, a voice called out behind him. "Excuse me, young man," came a sharp, clipped tone. "Are you a resident here?" Michael turned to see a woman in her mid-50s watching him with narrowed eyes. She stood with her arms crossed, her expression firm. Karen Wilkins, a longtime resident known for keeping a watchful eye over the neighborhood, perhaps a little too watchful. "Yes, ma'am," Michael answered politely, forcing a smile. "I live just a few streets down." Karen didn't return the smile. Instead, she took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "Where exactly?" she asked, her tone pressing. Michael hesitated, caught off guard by the questioning. Oak Ridge Avenue. My mom and I just moved in." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "I've lived here for 20 years, and I know just about everyone. I don't recall seeing you before." Michael felt a flicker of unease, but kept his voice even. "I haven't had a chance to come to the pool yet." He glanced toward the entrance, hoping to end the conversation and finally start his afternoon. Karen, however, wasn't finished. "Do you have proof? An ID? A pool pass?" Michael blinked. "No, He gestured toward the check-in desk. "I thought residents just signed in." Karen's expression hardened. "Well, we can't just let anyone walk in, can we?" A few heads began to turn. People lounging nearby exchanged glances, some subtly shifting their attention toward the exchange. Yet no one spoke up. The lifeguard stationed a few feet away glanced up from his phone, but quickly looked away. Michael took a slow breath. "Ma'am, I live here. I just want to swim." Karen let out a disapproving hum, arms still firmly crossed. "I think we should verify that." She turned and waved over one of the staff members. Within moments, a security guard approached. He was tall, stocky, and wore an expression that was neither aggressive nor particularly friendly. "What's the issue here?" Karen gestured toward Michael. "This young man says he lives in the neighborhood, but he has no proof." Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had come here expecting an afternoon of swimming, not an interrogation. The security guard gave Michael a once-over. "Do you have an ID, kid?" Michael shook his head. "I didn't think I needed one just to swim." Karen let out a scoff. "Rules are rules." A murmur rippled through the growing crowd. Some parents whispered to each other, while others shifted uncomfortably. The lifeguard, who had previously been disinterested, now looked as though he was debating whether to intervene. Michael stood his ground, forcing himself to remain calm. "I live on Oak Ridge Avenue. My mom's at work right now, but I can call her if that's necessary." Karen folded her arms tighter. "I don't think that will be necessary. If you don't have proof, you can't be here." Michael clenched his jaw, the weight of the moment settling heavy in his chest. Was this really happening? The silent stares, the whispered conversations, the way no one, no adult, no authority figure, was stepping up to say this was wrong. He felt his fingers tighten around his towel. He could feel the tension growing. He could feel the expectation in the air. Would he back down? Would he walk away in frustration? Or would he demand the respect he deserved? What would you do? If you were there, would you speak up for Michael? Would you choose option 1, step in and defend him? Or option 2, stay silent and watch? Let us know in the comments. Stories like this happen every day, and they deserve to be told. If you believe in standing up for what's right, take a moment to share this video. Let's make sure these conversations reach as many people as possible. A hush settled over the pool, the easy laughter and splashing now mere background noise. People had noticed the interaction, the sharpness in Karen Wilkins' voice, the quiet but firm resistance in Michael's. But no one moved, no one spoke. An elderly couple, sitting just a few feet away, exchanged uneasy glances. The husband, a retired school principal, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Maybe we should say something," he muttered under his breath, tilting his hat lower over his eyes. His wife, who had seen enough of these encounters in her lifetime, hesitated. "And what if we're wrong?" she whispered. "What if it's just a misunderstanding?" A young mother with 2 small children sat nearby, her arms wrapped around her toddler, her older child watching with wide, curious eyes. She could feel the discomfort creeping up her spine, the weight of her own silence pressing on her. She wanted to believe this wasn't what it looked like, but deep down, she knew better. She bit her lip, rocking her child slightly, willing herself to look away. By the lifeguard stand, a teenager leaned lazily against the post, scrolling through their phone. They had heard the exchange, sensed the tension, but their fingers continued tapping at the screen. They weren't paid to get involved. It wasn't their problem. Michael stood in the center of it all, feeling the weight of their gazes, their silence. He knew this feeling well, this quiet, unspoken message that said, "You're on your own." He kept his expression neutral, but inside something tightened. It wasn't just frustration. It was something deeper, a kind of exhaustion. He had done nothing wrong. Yet here he was, on trial for simply existing in a space that was supposed to welcome him. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, firm yet gentle. "Keep your head up, son. People will doubt you, question you. But you know who you are. Stay calm. Stay steady." He exhaled slowly, gripping his phone in his pocket. He could feel the heat rising in his face, not from anger, but from the sheer unfairness of it all. He could walk away, avoid the conflict, let Karen win. But what would that teach him? What would that tell the silent onlookers? He pulled out his phone and typed quickly, "Mom, can you come to the pool? There's a problem." His thumb hovered over the send button for a moment before pressing it. He swallowed the lump in his throat and lifted his head again, looking Karen in the eye. Before she could say another word, the clatter of boots on pavement signaled the arrival of security. 2 men in navy uniforms approached with purpose, their expressions unreadable. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, adjusted his belt as he stopped in front of Michael. "What's going on here?" Karen's voice was firm, confident. "This young man says he lives here, but he has no proof. This is a private facility, and we have rules." Michael tightened his grip on his phone. "I live on Oak Ridge Avenue," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I don't have an ID on me, but my mother." "Rules are rules," Karen interrupted, her voice sharp. "If he can't prove it, he doesn't belong here." The shorter security guard, a man with graying hair and tired eyes, sighed, looking at Michael with something close to sympathy. "Do you have anyone who can vouch for you?" Michael lifted his phone. "My mom is on her way." The taller guard exchanged a look with Karen. "Until then, we're going to have to ask you to leave." A ripple moved through the small crowd that had gathered. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. Michael clenched his jaw. He could feel the expectation pressing in on him. Was he supposed to accept this quietly? To step back, lower his head, and leave as if he'd done something wrong? "No, I'm not leaving," he said, his voice firm. "I live here. I belong here." The silence that followed was deafening. The lifeguard, still standing with their phone in hand, looked up for the first time, their expression shifting slightly. The young mother, still holding her child, let out a shaky breath. The elderly couple sat frozen, the wife gripping her husband's arm. Karen scoffed. "This is ridiculous." Michael stood his ground. He was alone in this moment, but he refused to let them push him away. The tension grew heavier. The bystanders, their guilt bubbling just beneath the surface, still said nothing. But the weight of their silence had never felt so loud. A sleek black luxury car pulled up just outside the pool's entrance, its polished surface reflecting the bright afternoon sun. The low hum of its engine silenced the murmuring crowd as all eyes shifted toward it. The energy in the air changed instantly, thick with curiosity and a growing sense of unease. The security guards straightened their postures, the lifeguard lowered their phone, and Karen Wilkins took a half-step back, as if sensing that something was about to shift dramatically. The car door opened, and out stepped Governor Lisa Carter, exuding an air of quiet authority. Her tailored navy blue suit, neatly pressed, contrasted sharply with the casual poolside setting. She moved with purpose, her heels clicking against the pavement with every measured step. The crowd parted slightly, instinctively making way for her as she approached. Michael, still standing tall, despite the frustration etched on his face, locked eyes with his mother. There was no fear in his expression, only relief that someone had come who wouldn't just watch in silence. Karen's complexion paled. She recognized Governor Carter immediately, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. The security guards exchanged uneasy glances, a new tension settling between them. One cleared his throat as if preparing to explain, but the governor spoke first. "So, tell me again," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. "Why was my son treated like a criminal?" Karen stammered, her composure unraveling. I didn't realize he was your son. I was just trying to follow the rules." Her voice, which had been sharp and commanding moments earlier, was now hesitant, unsure. Governor Carter turned her gaze toward the security officers. "And you? Did you question his right to be here? Or did you simply accept someone else's assumptions?" The taller officer shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we were responding to a complaint. We didn't mean—" "You didn't mean to what?" she interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Did you ask for proof of residency from anyone else here? Or was it just my son?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Karen wrung her hands, looking to the guards as if hoping for support, but they said nothing. The weight of the moment pressed on everyone present. A murmur began spreading through the crowd. A woman near the pool's edge whispered to her friend. A father leaned toward his wife. A lifeguard shifted their stance uncomfortably. The realization was sinking in. Governor Carter let her gaze sweep across the gathering, making sure each person felt the significance of what had just unfolded. "Bias doesn't always look like a raised voice or harsh words," she said. "Sometimes it's as simple as a silent assumption, a decision made without question because it feels right. But that assumption can be dangerous." Her words settled over the crowd like a heavy blanket, exposing the quiet complicity of their inaction. Some averted their eyes, others shifted in place, uncomfortable with the truth they had just been forced to face. The lifeguard looked down, guilt flickering across their face. The elderly couple, who had hesitated earlier, exchanged a regretful glance. Karen, realizing there was no graceful way out, sighed and stepped back. I didn't mean any harm," she muttered, but the words felt hollow. Michael, standing beside his mother, finally allowed himself to breathe. He hadn't needed to raise his voice. He hadn't needed to fight or argue. The truth had spoken for itself, louder than any shouting match could have. And for the first time since the encounter began, he felt seen. The governor turned to her son, placing a hand on his shoulder, before glancing back at the crowd one last time. "It's not enough to avoid wrongdoing," she said. "We have to challenge it when we see it." No one dared to look away this time. The silence that followed the governor's words was deafening. The security guards, who had moments ago stood firm in their authority, now shifted uncomfortably. The taller guard, the one who had initially questioned Michael with such certainty, cleared his throat. He removed his hat, running a hand over his short-cropped hair as he exhaled. "Governor Carter, we made a mistake," he admitted, his voice lower now, stripped of its former authority. "We should have listened before jumping to conclusions." The second guard, older and visibly shaken, nodded in agreement. "We should have handled this differently. That's on us." The weight of their admission hung in the air. A few of the bystanders who had initially remained passive now murmured amongst themselves. The lifeguard, the young man who had ignored the confrontation earlier, stepped forward hesitantly. He swallowed, shifting nervously before speaking. I should have said something, he confessed. I saw what was happening. I knew it wasn't right, and I didn't want to get involved. He looked toward Michael, his expression filled with regret. I won't stay silent again. His words sparked something in the crowd. The mother who had clutched her child earlier looked at Michael with visible guilt. She gave a small nod, almost as if to say she understood now. Too late though it was. The elderly couple who had debated speaking up looked at each other once more, their expressions softened by realization. The whispers among the crowd grew louder, the collective understanding of their inaction settling over them like an invisible weight. Karen, standing stiffly with her arms still crossed, scoffed. Oh, so now everyone has something to say. Where was all this righteous indignation a few minutes ago? She shook her head, her voice dripping with bitterness. I was just following the rules. That's all this was. The governor, unwavering, met Karen's defiance with a steady gaze. Following the rules? Or making assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't? Karen's lips tightened. She crossed her arms more firmly, her body language defensive. I don't see what's so wrong about wanting to keep our neighborhood safe. Safe from what? The governor's question cut through the tension like a blade. A 15-year-old boy carrying a towel. A resident trying to enjoy his community pool. Tell me, Karen, what exactly about my son made you think he didn't belong here? Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. She glanced at the security guards, then at the bystanders, looking for support. None came. Even those who might have silently agreed with her earlier now looked away, unwilling to stand with her in the face of the undeniable truth. The governor took a step closer, her voice measured but firm. Bias isn't always loud. Sometimes, it looks like rules applied unfairly. It looks like silence when speaking up is inconvenient. It looks like a mother having to leave work to remind a community that her son is just as much a part of it as anyone else. Karen swallowed hard. The confidence she had displayed so boldly earlier had drained from her face, replaced by something she couldn't quite mask: recognition. Recognition of what she had done, of the truth behind the governor's words, of the way the weight of the moment had shifted against her. She took a shaky breath. I didn't mean for it to be like this. But it was, Governor Carter replied simply. Karen looked down, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. I guess I should think about that. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it was there, an acknowledgement, a beginning. The governor nodded once, not in victory, but in resolution. We all should. Governor Carter took one last sweeping look at the faces around her. The crowd stood in uneasy silence, their earlier hesitation now replaced by an undeniable awareness. She took a steady breath, her voice carrying a weight that could not be ignored. Justice isn't just about laws, she said. It's about people. It's about the choices we make when no one is watching. It's about having the courage to stand up when we see something wrong, even when it's inconvenient. She let the words settle, watching as some faces lowered, others shifted uncomfortably. Today my son was questioned, not because of what he did, but because of an assumption that should never have been made. But the truth is, this isn't just about him. It's about all of us. What kind of community do we want to be? One that watches in silence, or one that speaks up? A murmur moved through the crowd. A few people exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from discomfort to something deeper, understanding. We can do better, she continued. Not just today. Not just because this moment forced us to look at ourselves, but always. Because if we don't, this will happen again. Maybe not here, maybe not to my son, but somewhere to someone else. And silence will be just as loud as the actions that caused it. The weight of her words settled over the group. The lifeguard, who had remained frozen in indecision earlier, stepped forward again. Governor Carter, you're right, he admitted. I should have stepped in sooner. I saw what was happening, and I hesitated. I won't do that again. A woman near the back, the same young mother who had held her children close, spoke next. I wanted to say something, she said, her voice filled with regret. I told myself it wasn't my place. But I see now. That's exactly the problem. If it's not my place, then whose is it? The elderly man who had debated with his wife earlier gave a slow nod. We thought about it. We thought about saying something. But we were afraid of making a scene. He sighed, shaking his head. Maybe it's time we stop worrying about making a scene and start worrying about what happens when we don't. A shift moved through the crowd. People who had stood by in silence were now stepping forward, acknowledging what they had ignored. The collective realization was palpable, the understanding that justice wasn't just about a single moment, but about an ongoing responsibility. Karen Wilkins, who had stood stiffly throughout, looked at the faces around her. For the first time, she seemed to grasp the depth of what had happened. Her lips pressed together, her shoulders tense. But she didn't argue. She didn't walk away. She simply listened. The atmosphere at the pool had changed. What had begun as an ordinary summer afternoon had become something else, a turning point. People who had never considered their role in justice were now seeing it clearly. It wasn't just about the rules or who was in charge. It was about the choices each of them made, in small moments and big ones. Governor Carter turned to her son, placing a hand on his shoulder. "This isn't just a lesson for them," she said softly. "It's a lesson for all of us." Michael nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. He had stood alone at first, but now he wasn't alone at all. Michael walked beside his mother as they made their way toward the parking lot. The tension of the past hour still clung to the air, but something inside him felt different. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defeated. He felt stronger, not because the moment had been easy, but because he had faced it, because he hadn't backed down. His mother's words echoed in his mind, steady and unwavering. Respect isn't given freely. Sometimes you have to demand it. He had seen that firsthand today. If he had walked away, if he had let Karen's assumptions dictate his place, nothing would have changed. But by standing firm, by refusing to be dismissed, he had forced people to confront something they might have otherwise ignored. He glanced back at the pool, at the faces still lingering there. Some were still deep in thought. Others exchanged quiet words with one another. A few, like the lifeguard and the young mother, had already made a commitment to be better, to speak up next time. That mattered. Change didn't happen all at once, but it had to start somewhere. His mother squeezed his shoulder lightly as they reached the car. "Proud of you, son," she said. He didn't need to say anything in response. The warmth in his chest spoke for itself. As they drove away, Michael let himself think about what had happened. The questions, the assumptions, the silence from those who should have spoken up. He knew this wouldn't be the last time he would face something like this. But now, he also knew he wouldn't be alone in it. And that was a start. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever witnessed something unfair and stayed silent? Maybe you told yourself it wasn't your place to step in. Maybe you thought someone else would handle it. Maybe you just weren't sure what to say. But here's the truth. Silence helps no one. It allows moments like this to keep happening over and over. It allows injustice to slip by, unchecked and unchallenged. And if we do nothing, if we say nothing, we become part of the problem. So I ask you again, what would you do? If you were at that pool, watching everything unfold, would you have spoken up? Would you have defended Michael? Or would you have looked away, hoping someone else would step forward? How can we create safer, fairer communities for everyone? How can we ensure that no one feels alone in these moments? These are questions we all need to ask ourselves, not just today, but every day. Because standing up for what's right isn't just about one moment. It's about a lifetime of choices. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of speaking up, take a moment to share it. Like, comment, and spread the message. Because when we bring these conversations into the open, when we refuse to let silence win, we create real change. No one should have to stand alone. Let's make sure they never have to.